everybody. I'm Shrijaya Singh. I teach English at CLATapult. Today, the topic that we shall be dealing with is main idea. Main idea has also many other names such as central purpose, primary purpose, central theme, primary theme, main theme, and so on. Now, what is main idea? Main idea is the main statement about the passage, is the most important idea that the passage deals with. It is the key issue that the author wanted to bring to the attention of the readers. So basically, you can think about it as the most important statement in the passage and that exact thing that the author wanted to convey through writing that passage. What must have prompted the author to write that passage? It is the sum and substance of the passage reduced into one sentence. Having an understanding of main idea will also orient you towards the rest of the passage. Then you will be able to identify what is the main idea and what are the supporting ideas. To briefly explain to you, supporting ideas refers to the statements that help you substantiate the main idea. So for example, the main idea is that the conditions in the slum are pathetic. The supporting ideas could be how water is not adequate, how it is overpopulated, how the sanitation facilities need betterment, and so on. So these would be the supporting ideas. But once you deduce what the main idea is, having an understanding of what the supporting ideas are and what role it plays will also be clear to you. Now, when you are trying to look for the main idea, please remember that main idea might be expressly stated in the passage or impliedly stated, meaning it might be written in the passage or it may not be written in the passage, but it would be apparent, meaning that it would be implied. So for example, if I'm writing a passage on conditions of the slum, right? I could talk about it like this. I visited a slum yesterday. The conditions at the slum were pathetic as I found it. Here is why. And then they could continue with the various reasons, right? So here they have expressly stated it. They might also imply it if, say, the author merely write, yesterday I visited a slum. Here is what I saw. And then they keep talking about it in paragraph after paragraph, giving you different reasons, which all bring you to the conclusion that the conditions of the slum are pathetic. So here, even though it would not have to be written that the conditions of the slum are pathetic, you would still be able to imply it. So this is how the main idea might even be implicitly stated. Now, while we're trying to identify main idea, let's step away from it for a minute or so. Let's look at what the characteristics of a main idea should be. Remember three things. It needs to be concise, it needs to be precise, and it needs to be adequately broad. So let's start with concise. Concise means brief, pithy, meaning it should convey as much information as possible in as few words. So if, say, I have to tell you the main idea of a 400-word passage, should my main idea be of 100 words? No. It needs to be brought down to one sentence maximum. So that is what an ideal main idea looks like. It needs to be concise, right? So please remember this, that the option should ideally be concise. If it's not concise, how is it the main idea? Now let's look at precise. Precise means it needs to be to the point, right? If I am talking about cricket in India, right? If the passage is only talking about cricket in India, your main idea cannot be cricket around the world, or it cannot be cricket in general. If, for example, if I'm talking about the history of cricket in India, your main idea cannot be history of cricket, because that is not precise enough, right? So please remember this, it needs to be precise. Now, it also needs to be broad enough, which is the third requirement. Here, please remember that it might sound as if I'm contradicting myself. What you merely need to do here is to strike a balance between precise and broad. So it should not be too precise, meaning if I am talking about slums, let's go back to the slums example. I may have also talked about, how there isn't adequate drinking water, there isn't adequate potable water. And I may have, say, spent a paragraph talking about it. And then in the subsequent paragraphs, I talk about, malnourishment and the spread of contagious diseases, how it is overcrowded and so on. So here, your main idea needs to be broad enough to cover everything within its scope. Your main idea cannot be lack of adequate drinking water in the passage, because then this option would not be broad enough to cover the entire passage within its scope. So please remember that while your main idea needs to be precise enough, it needs to be to the point enough, it does not need to be unnecessarily broad, but it also does not need to be too precise. It cannot be so narrowed down that it does not take within its purview the entire passage. So please remember, your main idea has to be concise, precise, and broad. Alright, so main idea questions can be framed using any of the synonyms we discussed earlier. So it could be straitjacket question of what is the main idea of the passage, what is the primary purpose of the passage, what was the crux of the passage. But it can also be framed slightly differently by saying what is the author primarily concerned with in the passage, what is the author trying to convey through the passage, and so on. So now that we know what the questions look like, let's go back to how you can identify main idea. Remember that to identify the main idea, you just have to identify the most important thing that the author is trying to talk about. And remember the characteristics we discussed: concise, precise, and broad. So now we know that the main idea might be be explicitly stated in the passage or implicitly stated in the passage, meaning it can be directly stated or indirectly stated. Let's look at them in turn. So, how do you identify main idea if it is directly stated in the passage? In this scenario, three things can happen. They can state the main idea right in the beginning. So, for example, when I said, I went to a slum today and the conditions were pathetic, here is what I saw. So basically here I have written the main idea in the introduction of the passage. Next scenario can be where I write it in the concluding sentence. So I can give you all sorts of reasonings and then say, therefore, I found the conditions of the slum to be horrible. So that becomes the concluding sentence. It can also be stated in the middle of the passage. So here, for example, say I have to talk about, say, rising crime rate in metropolitan cities, okay? And I might start with recounting an incident that I saw in the middle of the road and how gory it was, and I give details about it in 2 to 3 paragraphs. Then I talk about how this led me to realize that occurrences like these when I was younger were much infrequent as compared to now, and then how I checked the statistics, the crime statistics, and it turned out that there had been a rise in crimes in the city. And then after that, in the subsequent paragraphs, I will keep talking about, say, the reasons for the rise in crimes in the city, how there are statistics which also reflect that, what suggestions can I be giving, what sort of models worked in different cities around the world to curb crime, and so on. So here, if you think about it, I have actually sandwiched the main idea between the anecdote and the subsequent paragraphs which talk about the causes and recommendations and so on and so forth. So here, I talk about the anecdote in the start to drive home the gravity of the situation, and then I state the main idea. So here, while in the beginning you may feel that the passage is simply about that incident, it's not really. I just talked about the incident to lay the foundation of what I actually wanted to talk about, which was the rising crime rates in the metropolitan city. So here you have to realize that the main idea sometimes might just be sandwiched somewhere in the middle of the passage. Now comes the trickier part of figuring out the main idea when it is not explicitly stated, when it is implicitly stated. So here the main idea is not written explicitly in the passage. So you will take the help of the supporting ideas, the reasons, the justifications, the fact, the way information is arranged, and try to surmise what it is leading towards. So for example, going back to slum conditions, right? Say I didn't state in the passage that the slum conditions are horrible. I simply said there is malnutrition, there is lack of clean drinking water, there aren't adequate sanitation facilities, there are widespread diseases, health facilities are abysmal, and so on. Here, if you look at all of these facts or justifications, or I might even give examples, all of these are supporting ideas, and they will all lead you, they will all act as clues, as hints to make you arrive, to help you arrive at the main idea. So for surmising the main idea when it is not explicitly stated, just read the whole passage, take a step away from it, distance yourself a little bit from it, literally and figuratively, and think about what broadly happened. What is the role that these supporting ideas are playing? And that will bring you to the main idea. Now let's move to the last leg of this video about where you need to exercise caution in main idea questions. Please remember that just because an option is correct as per the passage, the information in the option aligns with what the passage says does not by itself make it the correct answer. Why? Because this main idea needs to be broad enough. So what might be correct is just a specific detail stated in the passage. So for example, if I say that there aren't enough health facilities in the slum, it would be correct, but it is not the main idea. So simply because something has been stated in the passage and is true as per the passage, it may not be the answer because it may not meet the criteria of concise, precise, and broad. It goes without saying that if, say, an option is saying something that has not been said in the passage, or that's not really what the passage is dealing with, or something that contradicts what the passage is saying, can never be the main idea, because main idea is established through the entire passage, right? Because it takes the entire passage within its scope. So your option can never go against what the passage is saying in sum and substance. Thank you.